I used to believe that love could overcome anything. For 5 years, I stood by Samantha Gray's side, through career changes, family drama, late nights, and quiet mornings. I'm a doctor. I've been through chaos, pressure, and life and death decisions. But nothing prepared me for the moment I realized I was about to marry not just the wrong person, but the wrong family. It happened at our rehearsal dinner, a night that was supposed to celebrate unity, love, and the journey ahead. Instead, it became a spotlight for mockery, for cruelty, directed at the one person who couldn't defend herself, my late mother. They laughed, they jeered. And Samantha, she smiled along. In that moment, I stopped being a groom I became a son, reclaiming his dignity. And what happened next wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. Because sometimes, walking away from the aisle is the only way to walk back to yourself. I met Samantha Gray at a medical charity gala 6 years ago. She walked in like she belonged there, elegant, poised, magnetic. We got to talking over a tray of canopies and wine neither of us liked. And by the end of the night, she gave me her number with a grin that said, "You're not like the others." We were opposites in the obvious ways. She was from a wealthy, well-connected family, private schools, summer homes, and a last name that meant something in certain circles. I was the son of a small-town nurse who raised 2 kids on grit, grace, and second jobs. And yet we clicked. She said she loved how grounded I was, how I didn't care about status or brands. I loved how driven she was, how she could take over a room without raising her voice. We balanced each other. At least, I thought we did. What I didn't know, not then, was that our lives had quietly crossed paths long before that gala. Years ago, Samantha's family lived in the same town I grew up in. Back then, they weren't the Grays. They were just Walter and Denise, owners of a struggling diner barely getting by. My mother, who volunteered at the local community center, often helped small businesses with their books. She didn't advertise it. She didn't ask for anything. That wasn't her way. She helped the Grays organize their finances, fill out confusing tax forms, and even offered to babysit Samantha once or twice when things got really rough. It was the kind of help people remember and sometimes resent, because not everyone wants a witness to their struggle. Some people would rather rewrite the story. By the time Samantha and I met, her family had moved on. New city, new money, new image. Samantha barely remembered our town. She mentioned it once, vaguely, as that little place we lived when I was a kid. I never pushed. When I brought her home to visit my dad, I showed her the community center where my mom used to work. She nodded politely, but it clearly didn't mean much to her. A week later, she met my mom. Once. My mother was already sick then, but sharp as ever. She smiled at Samantha and asked warm but pointed questions. Afterward, she held my hand and said quietly, "She's lovely. Just make sure she knows where she came from, and where you came from too." At the time, I thought it was a blessing. Now I wonder if it was a warning I didn't want to hear. It started with small things, like when I brought up my mom while we were planning the ceremony. I mentioned the idea of reserving an empty chair for her during the vows, a quiet way to honor her memory. Samantha barely looked up from her laptop and said, "Wouldn't that just make people sad? I don't think that's the vibe we want." I didn't push it. I told myself she just didn't understand how much that meant to me. But the comments kept coming. When we visited my old neighborhood for a community fundraiser, Samantha glanced around and said, "It's cute in a nostalgic kind of way, like a time capsule." I laughed awkwardly. That was my childhood. My front steps. The corner store where my mom used to take me every Sunday after her shift. At dinners with her parents, Samantha's father would make jokes about blue collar charm, or ask me how it felt to be moving up in the world. Samantha's mother once raised her glass and said, "To Samantha, for being so open-minded." I smiled through it all, every muscle in my jaw aching. The worst part wasn't their comments. It was Samantha's silence. Or worse, her laughter. She never once stepped in. Never said, "Hey, that's enough," or "Don't talk to him like that." Instead, she'd chuckle like they were just being playful, like I was being too sensitive if I brought it up later. When I told her I wanted to include one of my mother's favorite hymns in the ceremony, something my mother used to sing to me when I was a child, Samantha rolled her eyes. "Miles, this wedding isn't a memorial service. Can't we keep it upbeat?" Every time I tried to include a piece of my past, it was treated like clutter, something to be tidied away so her curated aesthetic wouldn't be disrupted. I began to feel like a guest star in my own life. Like, my role was to smile, nod, and not rock the boat. The more I tried to hold on to the pieces of where I came from, the more I felt her world trying to file them down, polish them away. And in the quiet spaces, late at night, alone with my thoughts, I started to ask myself a question I never imagined I'd need to ask. Was Samantha building a future with me? Or trying to build a version of me she could live with? They say love is blind. But sometimes it's not blindness, it's willful ignorance. A quiet refusal to see what's right in front of you. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, that refusal started to unravel. Samantha became distant. Not cold exactly, but distracted. She spent hours obsessing over flower arrangements and seating charts, but any time I brought up something personal, like including my mother's favorite quote in the ceremony, she brushed it off with a quick, "Do we really need to make this about her?" It wasn't just her. Her parents seemed to be growing more confident in their subtle digs. Samantha's father once joked over brunch, "Well, at least you'll bring a little humility to the family line, huh?" Samantha's mother laughed like it was the best line she'd heard all week. I waited for Samantha to speak up, to say, "That's not fair," or "Cut it out." But she never did. She just smiled, took another sip of her mimosa, and changed the subject. That was when I realized something brutal. She wasn't defending me because she didn't think there was anything to defend. One afternoon, I stopped by her parents' house to help finalize some rehearsal dinner details. Her mother was flipping through binders like she was planning a royal gala, and her father was on the phone bragging to someone about the guest list. I suggested maybe we tone things down a bit, make it more intimate. Morse. I brought up the idea of using a song my mother used to love for the background music during dinner. Samantha's mother didn't even look up. She just said, "That's sweet, but let's keep things modern, shall we?" This is Samantha's night. No one else in the room blinked. Not Samantha, not her father, not even the planner, just me, standing there, stunned and small. That night, I went home and sat in silence on my couch, staring at the framed photo of my mother I kept on the bookshelf. I thought about how she used to tell me, "You teach people how to treat you, Miles. Every time you stay quiet, you teach them it's okay." I had stayed quiet for too long. I had confused Samantha's elegance for empathy, her charm for compassion. But little by little, the mask was slipping, and what lay beneath wasn't cruelty. It was indifference. And sometimes, indifference cuts deeper than hate. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be a celebration, a prelude to joy, unity, and family. But from the moment we arrived at Samantha's parents' estate, I knew it was never about us. The place looked like something out of a luxury wedding magazine. Crystal chandeliers had been brought in just for the event. A private chef from Napa was flown in. Every detail screamed opulence, and every corner of the room whispered one message: "This is the Gray family's show." Samantha's mother was fluttering between tables in a designer gown, offering compliments to guests with an air of royalty. Her father stood at the entrance like a CEO welcoming shareholders to a board meeting, greeting people with the kind of practiced charm that made you feel small, no matter how big your smile. I scanned the room. There were nearly 100 guests, business associates, distant cousins I'd never met, local officials, journalists. I counted 5 people from my side: my father, my sister, a friend from med school, 2 cousins who had driven in from out of town. That was it. I pulled Samantha aside. "What happened to the list we agreed on?" I asked. "Where are the rest of my people?" She looked annoyed. "Miles, we needed to balance the room. My parents had to fill seats. They didn't want it to feel empty." Empty. That word lodged in my chest like a splinter. The dinner began, and so did the performance. Everything was choreographed: a string quartet playing ambient music, servers gliding like shadows, champagne flutes filled before you could even reach for them. But all I could think about was my mother. She would have hated this. Not the extravagance, though she would have joked about it later, but the lack of heart. The hollowness wrapped in glitter. She believed in warmth, in authenticity, in making people feel seen. This dinner felt more like a press event than a gathering of loved ones. Then came the introductions. Samantha's father took the mic, cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a State of the Union address, and began welcoming guests with grand flourishes and carefully measured jokes. Samantha's mother followed, praising Samantha's beauty, ambition, and refinement. Not once did they mention me by name. Not once did they thank my family for being there. I sat frozen at the head table, smiling tightly, hands clenched beneath the linen cloth. When the courses began, I barely touched my food. It didn't matter how expensive the wine was or how delicate the amuse-bouche tasted. My stomach was in knots. Then came the final toast, and what should have been the closing act to a polished evening. But instead it became the moment everything shattered. The final toast began with the clinking of a crystal glass, sharp, deliberate. Samantha's father stood again, straightening his jacket like he was about to deliver a TED talk. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice smooth and commanding, "thank you for being here to celebrate the union of 2 incredible families, ours and Miles's." The pause after my name felt like a comma that didn't belong, a polite hesitation that said, "Let's get this part over with." I swallowed hard. He launched into a speech about legacy and standards, about how Samantha had always been a star, how she had always deserved nothing but the best. He then turned toward me and added, with a smirk, "And while Miles may come from more humble beginnings, he has a good heart. He'll keep her grounded." A few people chuckled. My father didn't. My sister shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Samantha's mother was next. She took the mic like she was accepting an award. "Samantha has always been poised, elegant, and selective," she said. "When knew whoever she chose would have to match her, or at least try." Lauder. Polite, forced, cruel. And Miles, she added, turning to me with a smile so sweet it made my teeth hurt, has taught us all the importance of humility. Truly. Then, she leaned forward slightly and added, and patience. Samantha's taught him so much, hasn't she? More laughter. My jaw tightened. My hands trembled beneath the table. But nothing, could have prepared me for what came next. Samantha's father raised his glass again and said, "Before we close tonight, I want to take a moment to honor someone who isn't with us anymore." But who, let's say, made quite the impression. Miles's mother. For a moment, I held my breath. I thought, maybe just maybe he would say something kind. He didn't. She was certainly enthusiastic, he continued. Always had an opinion. Always wanted to help, even when no one asked. A few snickers. Samantha's mother chimed in, "Oh yes, I remember how she used to suggest how we should run our books. You remember that, darling? She practically lived at our diner for a month." Lauder again. "And she covered our payroll one time," her husband added. Very generous. Though a bit much. She did love feeling needed. He winked. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. They weren't remembering her. They were rewriting her. They were turning the woman who had helped them survive into a caricature. Into some meddling, overbearing townie who didn't know her place. And Samantha. She laughed. Just a little laugh. Polite, soft, almost apologetic. But it was enough. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. The room went silent. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned to me. "Is this supposed to be funny?" I asked, voice low, shaking. "Because I'm not laughing." Samantha's father raised an eyebrow. "Miles, come on. It's just a toast." "No," I said louder now. "It's disrespect. My mother helped your family when no one else would. She helped you sort your finances. She brought you customers when your tables were empty. She babysat your daughter when you were overwhelmed. And now that you've made it, you stand here and reduce her to a joke." Samantha's mother opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "She's gone," I said, my voice cracking. "She can't defend herself, and you, people she saved, you mock her like she was a nuisance." Samantha reached for my arm. "Miles, not here. Please, let's talk outside." I pulled away. "No, Samantha, we talk here, because you sat through every insult, every jab, every joke, and you laughed." Her eyes widened. "I didn't mean to, but you did," I said. "Hey, you meant to stay quiet. Because speaking up would have made this dinner less polished. Because honoring her honestly might have reminded everyone of who your family used to be." Whispers spread like wildfire through the room. I heard someone mutter my name. A phone lifted. Cameras blinked. Samantha's father crossed his arms. "If this is how you handle pressure, maybe you're not ready for marriage." I met his eyes. "You're right, Silence. I'm not ready," I said. "Not to marry into a family that buries gratitude beneath ego. That confuses cruelty for charm. That turns survival into shame." I turned to my father and sister. They were already standing. Then I looked back at Samantha, tears brimming, hands frozen. "I loved you," I said. "But I won't build a life on silence." I stepped away from the table, away from the chandeliers, away from the stage they built out of our history, and out into the night. The wedding was off, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like my mother would be proud. The air outside hit me like a wave, cool, quiet, real. Inside, they were probably still murmuring, still pretending to laugh off what had just happened. But out here, the noise faded. The lights dimmed. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I could hear myself breathe. My father stepped up beside me. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. A moment later, my sister joined us, slipping her hand into mine the way she used to when we were kids crossing the street. It said I saw it too. All of it. We left together. No goodbyes. No looking back. I woke up the next morning to a phone vibrating off my nightstand. Then another. And another. By 8 a.m., I had over 70 missed messages, a dozen voicemails, and 4 emails marked "You are Gent" from Samantha's mother. Samantha had called 12 times. Her last message was a whisper between sobs. "Please, Miles, don't end us like this." But we weren't ending. We were already over. The ending just finally caught up to her. I spent the morning at the community park near my apartment. It was quiet there. A few kids ran across the grass while their parents sipped coffee nearby. I sat on a bench and stared at the little pond where ducks floated aimlessly. I used to come here with my mom. She liked to bring breadcrumbs. She said the ducks reminded her of people, always moving, always making noise, rarely knowing why. That afternoon, Samantha showed up. I saw her before she spotted me. She looked like she hadn't slept. Makeup from the night before still faintly traced under her eyes, hair pulled into a loose knot like she'd gotten out of bed and just ran. She was holding something in her hands. A box. "Can we talk?" she asked, standing in front of me. I nodded slowly. "Go ahead." "I brought this," she said, handing me the box. Inside was the ring, and a photo of my mother, tucked gently under velvet. "I didn't know they were going to say all that," she said quietly. I was caught off guard. "But you weren't surprised," I replied. She flinched. "You knew how they were," I continued. "You've known. You've seen it happen before, to other people. But this time it was my mother. And you still sat there. She looked down. I didn't want to make it worse. No, I said. You didn't want to make it uncomfortable for them. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't laugh at her. I just froze. You laughed? I said. Maybe not at her, but definitely not for her. She didn't argue. Just stood there, hugging her arms. I thought I was marrying someone brave. I said more to myself than to her. Someone who could see wrong and say, that's enough. Someone who'd fight for what matters. I wanted to be, she whispered. I really did. I nodded. But you weren't it, and I can't build a life on almosts. She reached out for my hand, but I stepped back. I loved you, Samantha. But love without respect isn't enough. And I walked away. That night, I lit a candle in my apartment and placed it beside my mother's photo. I didn't say much. Just, you were right. Again. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd finally honored her, not just with words but with action. She gave me strength, and I used it, not to fight, but to let go. It started with a post, a photo of Samantha on the balcony of her parents' condo, eyes red, captioned simply, some endings break your heart. Others show you who someone really was. The comments flooded in. You deserve better. Stay strong, queen. Men don't know how to handle powerful women. He was probably intimidated by your family. I didn't respond. Not at first. Then came the curated source leaks. Tabloids ran with headlines like cold feet or control freak. Inside the abrupt wedding split. Family tensions one-sided love. Samantha Gray speaks through silence. Insider groom stormed out after minor joke at rehearsal dinner. Minor joke. They called dragging my mother's memory through a champagne toast a joke. I stayed quiet for a week, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted to believe the truth would stand on its own. But truth, left alone, can be twisted into anything. My sister was the first to push me. You don't have to go full internet revenge, she said. But you owe mom better than silence. She was right. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote something I never expected to write. Not to defend myself, but to remind people, especially Samantha's curated audience, that dignity isn't disposable. My post, my mother once helped Samantha's family when they were still running a struggling diner in a small town. She gave her time, her energy, her kindness, never asking for anything back. She only met Samantha once, years later. That was enough to leave an impression. At our rehearsal dinner, my mother was reduced to a punchline. Her generosity, mocked. Her memory, twisted, not by strangers, by the very people she once helped. Some things aren't just offensive. They're irredeemable. I didn't walk out to make a statement. I walked out because I refused to let love blind me to cruelty. I walked out because silence would have made me complicit. To those wondering if it was over something small, remember this: if someone laughs while the dead are being ridiculed, imagine how they'll treat the living. I hit post. Then I shut the laptop and went for a walk. By morning, the comments came in waves. Some were angry. Some were stunned. But the ones that mattered were grateful. You stood up for her. I wish my brother had done that when they mocked our dad. My mom raised me alone too. This hit hard. Thank you. You gave me the courage to walk away from a toxic engagement. One message stood out. From a name I didn't recognize. I was a waitress at the Gray's old diner. I remember your mom. She brought donuts for us every Sunday after her shift. She told me I had a good eye for detail. Now I work in accounting. Just thought you should know. She changed lives quietly. I sat there, reading it 3 times. Then I closed my eyes and smiled. They had tried to erase her, dress her down with polished words and passive-aggressive toasts. But they forgot something. She didn't need to be remembered by the loud. She was remembered by the kind, and the quiet, and the honest. And now, bye, everyone. It's been 3 months. 3 months since I walked out of that chandelier-lit theater of a dinner. 3 months since I gave the ring back to the silence it belonged in. 3 months since I chose to grieve with my head held high, instead of smiling through insult just to keep a wedding alive. People still ask me if I regret it. I don't. But I grieved it. Not just the relationship, but the version of myself that was willing to shrink to fit someone else's world. I went back to my hometown a few weeks ago. The diner was still there. Different name, new signage, sleeker branding, but the bones were the same. I walked in and ordered coffee, like I used to when I was 17 and waiting for my mom to get off work. The girl behind the counter was new. Probably didn't know who I was. That was fine. I paid in cash and left a $20 tip. More than the coffee was worth, but less than what that place had once owed my mother. When I stepped outside, the wind was cold in that familiar way. Like it wasn't punishing, just reminding. Reminding me where I came from. Reminding me who raised me. Reminding me that legacy isn't about wealth or weddings. It's about what survives after people stop clapping. I still keep her photo by the window. My mother. It's not a shrine. It's a grounding point. On days when I feel like I'm not enough, I look at her and think she never needed a stage to make a difference. She just showed up. No fancy speeches. No curated image, just kindness. action, truth. That's the legacy I carry. And honestly, it's more than enough. A few weeks ago, I ran into someone at a bookstore cafe, an author giving a talk about ethical storytelling in medicine. We ended up sitting at the same table during the discussion. Her name was Clara. She asked about the pin on my coat, an old nursing pin that had belonged to my mom. When I told her, she smiled softly and said, "Sounds like she taught you how to live." I nodded. "And how to leave?" Clara didn't flinch at that. She just said, "Sometimes those are the same lesson." We talked for 2 hours after the event. We've been talking since. I don't know what this is yet. But for once, I'm not trying to define it too quickly. Some things deserve to grow slowly, without pressure, without expectations. Samantha never reached out again after the post. Her family issued a vague public statement about respecting all families involved and moving forward with grace. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because closure, I've learned, doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with stillness, with peace, with not needing the last word, because the truth already said enough. This is the part of the story no one talks about. Not the betrayal, not the confrontation, but the morning after, the rebuilding, the choosing of quiet over chaos. I still get angry sometimes, but it passes faster now. I still miss her, my mom, but I carry her more gently now, not like a wound, but like a compass. And I've stopped trying to make people understand who she was, because I know. And I think she knows I never let them rewrite her. Not every goodbye needs to be loud. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is to quietly walk away from those who mistake kindness for weakness, who take your silence as permission, and who try to rewrite the memory of someone you refuse to forget. I didn't leave the wedding to cause a scene. I left because my mother deserved more than polite cruelty dressed up in wine and chandeliers. She deserved the truth, and I deserved peace. I didn't lose love that night. I lost the illusion of it. I walked away from the version of myself that was too afraid to disappoint people who never truly respected me. And in return, I found something better. A life not built on performance but on presence, not on approval, but on integrity. My mother once told me, "The quiet choices shape you more than the loud ones." She was right. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a beginning, a quiet one, but it was mine.